Here is the reaction from the two newest Raiders, okay, Tyler Linderbaum and Quay Walker. Here's their reaction on joining Maxx Crosby in Las Vegas. Listen to this.
Love, Maxx to be here and play with him, and I've gone against him. He's not fun to go against. How we have to scout him, and his just ability to lead a team is pretty special.
There's so much that he can do, and the intensity that he play with. Honestly, I just love his play style, and I can't wait to play alongside him. And honestly, just to match his energy day in and day out. That's all I got to say. I think Maxx Crosby, his name and his play speak for itself.
Very few guys in this league that feel like the team they play for. Maxx Crosby feels like a Raider. Like, to me, he feels like a Raider. I always said this for years and years. Aaron Rodgers played for the Packers. He didn't necessarily feel like a Packer. He's this good-looking L.A. guy, lives in Malibu, dating celebrities. I'm like, he plays for the Packers. He doesn't necessarily feel like a Packer. I mean, Tom Brady in the summers, he got out of Boston. He'd go to New York. He'd go to Europe with Giselle. And did he feel like a Patriot? People now in New England don't think he's loyal enough to the team he used to play for now that he's a broadcaster for Fox. Maxx Crosby feels like a Raider, and that has value. Here's Matt Hasselbeck earlier yesterday on Max.
Maxx Crosby has the respect of the NFL, players, teammates, opponents, coaches, scouts, everybody. And he's not a one-trick pony. A lot of these guys that come up with all these sacks, they're great at rushing the passer. They're not great against the run. This dude's the real deal in every way. I mean, he's always at the top of the list. TFLs, tackles for loss in the run game. He's the real deal in the run game, the pass game, on the field, off the field, an identity setter. He's a dog.
I think it's interesting. There was a stat that I think Jason, one of our producers, gave me this week that I thought, no, it was Ryan. It's a fascinating stat that it's hard to wrap your brain around. 4 of the last 7 Super Bowls, no other sport is like this in the world. 4 of the last 7 Super Bowls have had a team in it that didn't make the playoffs the previous year. Last year, Seahawks, Patriots, 2 for 2. Didn't make the playoffs. So, and I'm not saying the Raiders are going to do that, but if you look at the Raiders today, if Clint Kubiak and Fernando Mendoza are as good as I think they're going to be with Tyler Linderbaum and all these young offensive players, Colton Miller back at left tackle, I'm telling you, the Raiders, if they stay healthy through camp, see what they do. They have 11 picks in the draft. So again, they've got a first, a second, a third, a bunch of fourths and fifths. I would not be surprised. They're such a young team. If they took a bunch of those fourth and fifth and sixth round picks and moved up and got more threes and went kind of top heavy on the draft. And the other thing is, you could say to yourself, well, I mean, the Raiders aren't going to leap Kansas City right now. The Raiders roster, if Fernando Mendoza is as good as I think, it's not that far off Kansas City's roster. It may be better. You think I'm crazy? It may be better.
Colin Cowherd is absolutely heating up with his recent takes, and I need to address the Las Vegas Raiders situation that has completely taken over the offseason conversation. Before I dive into my analysis and share my perspective, I have to take a moment to acknowledge something important. Raiders fans, I genuinely need to thank you. Everything this franchise has been doing recently, the front office moves, the organizational direction, the energy radiating from the fan base, it has genuinely carried the offseason for me in a major way. I live for football. I mean that sincerely. When we don't have games to watch, when the season ends, I get genuinely depressed. It's such a bummer. I feel lost and confused. You know that Ben Affleck meme where he's just sitting there looking off into the distance, all upset and defeated? That's me during the off-season. I exist for football conversations. I live for discussions that actually carry weight and substance. I can't just endlessly recycle the same topics or manufacture drama out of thin air. That's not who I am. That's why post-game analysis resonates with me so deeply, because we're breaking down something that just happened. It's practical. We all witnessed it together, so there's a foundation for real discussion. The Las Vegas Raiders have been carrying the offseason conversation, and the fan base has been absolutely phenomenal. You guys are so engaged, so present in these discussions that it's honestly been a pleasure. Before all of this started unfolding, I told you I'd be making a ton of Raiders content. I wanted to keep talking about this team because I was genuinely optimistic and excited about the direction. Little did I know how prophetic that would become. I didn't anticipate things would genuinely catch fire, and we'd be discussing the Raiders practically around the clock. Please keep watching the videos in full and subscribing. When you subscribe and watch completely, views increase dramatically, subscribers multiply. I keep emphasizing this isn't about chasing numbers for their own sake. I want to create Raiders content that lots of people watch and discuss so we can have authentic conversations. I want to produce material people genuinely want to engage with, not just content designed to accumulate views. Sure, hitting 50,000 views is awesome, and I absolutely want that. But I want the dialogue more. I want to create things we're all excited to interact with and debate. Right now, the Raiders community has been doing the work. That's you guys showing up, watching, being part of something. Seriously, thank you. Because sometimes, during the off-season, you make videos even about teams that normally generate massive interest, and the energy just isn't there. I understand that. Not everyone is locked into NFL discussions in March. That's completely reasonable. But the ones showing up right now, man, you're giving me reasons to stay pumped and excited. I continue to love what the Raiders are doing. I've already shared all my takes about the entire saga, the trade rumors, the no-trade developments, the back-and-forth speculation. I'm turning that page now. I'm excited that Maxx Crosby remains with the Raiders. This presents both short-term and long-term considerations. Long-term, acquiring draft picks would have gone an incredibly long way toward building sustainable success. Short-term, having Maxx Crosby on your roster represents an absolutely gigantic positive for numerous reasons. You are always better with Maxx Crosby in your locker room. His impact on young, developing players cannot be overstated. His understanding of culture, his personal journey both on and off the field, his entire story, everything he's overcome, having younger players exposed to that, 22, 23, 24-year-olds entering the NFL, you always want someone like Crosby in the building. Even if he were well past his prime and just a shadow of his current self, having Maxx Crosby present would still be a net positive. I forget who said it, but someone recently expressed how excited they were to play alongside Crosby and match his energy. That sentiment captures something essential. Crosby gives teammates something to chase, something to match. He provides a frame around what effort actually looks like. When you hang pictures, you use a frame because it helps you understand what you're looking at. Without boundaries, you're just staring at infinity pools, wondering what's actually happening. You need context. You need to understand what you're pursuing, what you're chasing. It can't just be an abstract number like aiming for 12 sacks. That's a fine goal. But in the daily grind, sitting in meetings with pencil in hand, working in the weight room, practicing on the field, competing during games, having Maxx Crosby present allows teammates to understand what's actually being asked of them. In the short term, I absolutely love having Crosby there. The Raiders are rebuilding, and this connects to an underrated argument about organizational development. The Philadelphia Eagles have excelled at this for years. They're remarkable at replacing their culture carriers because they maintain core players responsible for passing the torch to each new wave of talent. When those foundational figures inevitably retire or move on, replacements already exist within the organization who can continue transmitting that cultural understanding. Take it from Crosby himself. He absolutely loves Philadelphia. He's praised the Eagles organization to such an extent that people started speculating whether he was angling for a move there. This matters because when you're rebuilding, when you're hitting the reset button and constructing something from scratch, which seems to be the Raiders' current trajectory, having Crosby there to establish the tone for new faces and young players goes an incredibly long way. It genuinely makes a substantial difference. This team has real potential. I believe in Fernando Mendoza and Clint Kubiak and the direction. I'm not going to repeat that take endlessly, but as Colin suggests, if they're simply competent, if they're as good as I think they can be, this team is ready to go. If they avoid being outright failures, this roster is prepared to compete. Having Maxx Crosby present from day one of that process makes an enormous difference. People have been asking in the comments how I feel about the Raiders offseason given all the drama, considering how many videos I've made about potential trades and draft picks. I still love it. I love everything they've done. And even keeping Crosby heading into this season, I still love the direction. The Raiders have positioned themselves in what amounts to a win-win scenario. Even if they eventually decide to move on from Crosby, they'll still receive excellent compensation. There's a reason teams were willing to offer first-round picks, or combinations of first and second-round selections. The value he commands on the trade market remains substantial. That's the asset you currently possess. If you move on a month from now or during the season, significant return remains available. It's not like Crosby is 36 years old. He still has prime years remaining. Even keeping him for the remainder of his contract represents a net positive. The financial considerations, trying to make sense of cap implications and how much burden one player represents versus another, that's genuinely difficult to parse. Every time I attempt deep cap analysis, I regret it because the complexity is overwhelming. I say this repeatedly. Cap management represents its own million-dollar industry within the NFL. The specialist teams, hired to ensure everything operates optimally, are compensated at elite levels because their work is so crucial. I'm not going to lose sleep over not fully grasping every nuance of contract structures and cap manipulation. What I can understand clearly is that the Las Vegas Raiders have dramatically improved their position. I made an entire video about free agency using a framework I find useful. On a scale of 0 to 10, where reaching 10 represents legitimate Super Bowl contention, teams start at different positions. Some teams were at 8 last season and only need subtle moves to hit 10. Other teams started at 0 with no chance of contending, but through aggressive improvement can skyrocket to 6 or 7. They're not Super Bowl winners yet, but they're springboarding themselves toward relevance. The Raiders have moved up 5 or 6 points in my estimation. They've absolutely skyrocketed. That's why I'm so hyped about what they're doing. I firmly believe this will become a team we consistently discuss in positive terms, a genuinely relevant franchise. I crave discussing teams that matter. When the Cowboys struggled last season and media outlets kept featuring them constantly, I found myself frustrated. They weren't in playoff position. I understand they have a massive fan base, and I'm not suggesting we ignore them completely. But we don't need to open every show with Dallas Cowboys discussion just because Jerry Jones draws attention. They weren't playoff contenders. I'd rather discuss the Seattle Seahawks, who actually secured the #1 seed and had legitimate Super Bowl chances, than manufactured narratives about how the Cowboys could be dangerous if they somehow made the postseason when they were multiple games back. I like discussing what actually matters, what's genuinely relevant. I feel that in my bones with the Las Vegas Raiders. Adding Maxx Crosby to the equation makes that feeling even stronger. It becomes more pressing, more prominent, more exciting, at least in the short term. I was fully on board with trading Crosby and accumulating picks. I was excited about that potential direction. But both things can be true simultaneously. Crosby is incredibly valuable to this team and can be an absolute monster. Trading him for draft capital could also be insanely beneficial. That's the freedom the Raiders possess. This isn't a Myles Garrett situation with the Cleveland Browns. The Browns aren't a good team. Their future lacks brightness. They didn't hire a coach who seems poised to usher in a new era. They're not getting Fernando Mendoza. They haven't dominated free agency. They haven't accomplished any of those things. The Raiders have. Whether you keep a player like Garrett or Crosby or trade them for picks depends entirely on your organizational situation. I believe the Raiders genuinely wanted to keep Crosby. My gut feeling, based on listening to everyone discuss how this unfolded, is that Crosby expressed readiness to move toward more certainty. He's had conversations with the organization previously. He likely communicated that while he believes Kubiak could be successful, while he thinks Mendoza could work out, he reached a point where he needed to go somewhere with already established answers. He couldn't wait to find out if things would come together. I believe that's ultimately how much of this played out. The Raiders' plan wasn't necessarily to move on from Crosby. Now we get to see what their actual vision looks like. There are always pivots in this league. Always. Colin discusses how teams that missed playoffs can reach Super Bowls. The Seahawks wanted to keep DK Metcalf. They wanted to keep Geno Smith. I love repeating that because everyone assumes Seattle made these brilliant proactive moves, moving on from Metcalf, acquiring Sam Darnold, releasing Smith. That's not what happened. They wanted to keep both players. But here's the powerful lesson. When you have to pivot, you make the next best decision. I keep reminding myself of this because so often we assume Plan A represents optimal strategy, when really Plan B should have been the priority all along. Clearly, that applied to Seattle. I don't think they were winning a Super Bowl with Smith and Metcalf anyway. That's the situation facing Las Vegas now. Make your Sam Darnold move, which I believe they're doing. Buckle up. Colin suggests the Raiders might be better than Kansas City. I'm not predicting Super Bowl appearances, but two teams missed playoffs last year and reached the Super Bowl. So who knows? Raiders better than Chiefs? Super Bowl bound? The headlines write themselves. Those are my thoughts on the Las Vegas Raiders. I genuinely love to hear yours. How do you feel about this franchise beyond just the Maxx Crosby saga? We've discussed that extensively, and by all means continue that conversation in comments. I'll keep reading. But what's your overall perception of the organization right now? Share your thoughts. I read every single comment. Agree or disagree. Let's generate discussion. Let's have some debates. But ultimately, let's keep it enjoyable. Please consider subscribing. We're building an amazing community, and I genuinely love seeing you participate. I want to create something we all feel connected to, something we're excited to be part of. We're making real progress toward that goal. Don't forget to like this video. It genuinely helps visibility and algorithm performance. Thank you so much. See you next time.